you know what? I just set it to live right now, and there's people rolling in. All right, guys. It looks like people are rolling in right now. I just wanted to welcome you guys to our second live session. I just want to make sure you guys set your chat to panelists and attendees so everyone can see where you guys are all coming from. So in the chat right now, guys, why don't you guys give us a little rundown, because we're in Calgary, Winnipeg, London, Ontario, guys. In the chat, guys, let us know where you guys are coming from right now. We're so excited. There's no music today because it's a different flow. It's all about flow today. We got Vancouver Island, Bolton, Burlington, and Sadish from Edmonton, man. All right, Alberta's Luxembourg, Lunenburg. Oh, wow, that's awesome. Toronto, Tanya, welcome. Caitlin. I learned that from, do you guys use Peloton? Like, people love shout outs, man. Like, they're just dying for, like, your century ride. Who's on Peloton in the chat? Who agrees with me that everyone loves shout outs? Jim Millard agrees, of course, because he's the one on here. So anyways, guys, how inspired in the chat right now? Tanya Yardley, thank you for agreeing with that. So in the chat right now, how inspired from a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being super inspired and 0 being, geez, let's turn the session off right now. How inspired are you right now coming on this session? Let us know. We got 11 from Tanya Yardley.
Tanya.
No doubt. Tanya Yardley. In the chat, guys, we got one person. We got Glenda, 8. Sunday Night Inspired. Jim Millard is a number, man, a number. It's like BAS, man. Satish, 10. All right, guys. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna actually all talk about flow and immersive sessions. we're gonna be just doing one screen. So right now you can see all 3 of us right now, and I'm gonna switch it over to Jim and Anna, who are gonna take this on. I'm just gonna be taking a back seat. But I know that that everyone on this call right now has already received 2 separate mind-blowing exercises that were well crafted by Anna and Jim. And how excited, guys, in the chat right now, how many of you guys have had a great look at these ones? So just put in there in the chat, looked at it, loved it, whatever. Put it in the chat right now so we know that you guys have had a chance to look over these mind exercises so our incredible titans, Jim and Anna, can get some feedback, guys. Tanya Yardley, loved it. Okay, all right. And we got Krista, high-fiving. And Satish, come on, man. Love, Erdem. He's there. So we've got all the love in this one. Anna, I want you to take us through what we're going to expect for this. And I'm going to turn my mic off, my screen off, everything, and I'm going to switch it over to you.
Okay. So Jim is going to start us off, and he's going to do a little bit of a summary about what the take homes should have been. I don't like saying should have been, what the take homes might have been from the first 2 mail outs. And then we'll switch it over to me, and I'll take you through the rituals that we mentioned and give you a little bit of background on my experience with the rituals. And then we'll talk a little bit about, maybe briefly touch upon core beliefs, negative core beliefs, and core values. And we're going to end it off with something that's not in your notes yet, but I promise it will be in your notes next session, about holding space. And one of my favorite topics. Actually, all this stuff. I love all this stuff. So Jim's going to try and keep me on track, because when I love stuff, he's really good at staying on track when he loves stuff. When I love stuff, it's like, whoa, look out. The Italian comes out, right? So.
Okay. So we got a Greek and an Italian. So I think we might be a little bit hand-talky, but let's kind of look back. And so we've given you guys a couple different looks at going from our head to our heart, right? So where we've gone so far is on a discovery from the invisible to trying to make it visible. And that's this whole head to heart thing. And it's kind of trying to bring these rituals. Anna's going to kind of introduce a little bit more from our unconscious into our conscious. Okay. And this is for Erdem. It's kind of like, yesterday I was so clever, I wanted to change the world. But today I'm so wise, I know I have to change myself. So a little bit of Rumi for you. And it's trying to open up that space and take our mind from constantly taking over and making it a servant of our soul again. Okay. And I apologize, as a 53-year-old guy, I might get on a little bit of a tangent talking about love, but that's what it's all about. We asked you guys to look at a wheel of feelings. And I'd like to see if you did it, throw into the chat what feelings came out for you. I know mine, I wrote them down, were sad, confused, and trusting, right? And sometimes it's hard to actually identify a feeling, and Anna will talk to that. But throw in the chat, if, to be honest, and I appreciate that, it's a safe space. If you did resonate with anything, as I keep talking about, trying to kind of bring your feelings, right, onto the page where you're meeting them. We talked about values, right, last time, and bringing those values towards core beliefs and trying to take all that stuff that affects all our decisions, affects our feelings, and try to kind of help us resonate with those a little bit and bring those visible. We asked you guys to look at Brene Brown's wonderful talk on vulnerability and how much we're all wired for connection. And what we wanted you to take from that was that life's about imperfection. I think we've strode too hard for perfection, and that vulnerability is a superpower. And only through vulnerability can we really meet love, joy, all those higher emotions. And there's no spiritual bypass to perfection. We've got to go through imperfection and stay in imperfection. And there's no real way to selectively numb that process, or we lose all that joy and all that love and all those things higher up on that ladder of selves. And then we really wanted you to look at self-awareness too, and self-awareness through Tasha. And that we all think that we're reflecting and that we're thinking about our thinking. But most of the time, it's shown that 95% of the time, we're not really truly reflecting. Only 10 to 15% of us are doing it. And that's what Anna's going to bring to life, because when we're really self-reflecting properly, we can be self-aware. And when we're really self-aware, that's the real road to fulfillment. That's the road to creativity, and that's the road to resilience. So that's hopefully what we wanted you guys to kind of go from that invisible to the visible. And without further ado, I'll pass this to the soul doula herself, Anna DeMarco.
Thanks, Jim. That's a great summary. So feelings, sometimes I find that if I kind of just, if I'm listening to someone else tell me about their feelings, or if I'm trying to sense my own, sometimes it helps me to just put my hand on my heart and on my belly and just breathe into that area. And that gives me a bit of a greater awareness to stay out of my head and stay where I'm trying to be. I'm trying to actually listen to what I'm feeling, not to what I'm thinking. So I would strongly encourage that if you really struggled with feelings, with finding your feelings. I'll let you know what am I feeling this week. Well, right at this moment, I was telling Karim and Jim, I was a little bit disappointed. I'm missing the first hour of Harry and Meghan being interviewed by Oprah. So I'm a big Harry and Meghan fan, but I'm going to catch up with that later. But truly this week, what has come up for me is on the positive side is a little bit of optimism, a little bit of hopefulness, and definitely some relief. And this is because finally here in Manitoba, we have a schedule for my 85-year-old father who has horrible COPD to get his first dose of COVID. And so that's, a big relief. At the same time, on the negative side, I'm a little bit frustrated. I'm a little bit anxious, and I'm curious. So my son, our oldest in our blended family, moved back from Whistler because he lost his brand new job as soon as COVID hit. He lost it because of COVID, and it was a job he was really excited about. And so he decided he'd come back to Winnipeg, and we had a plan that he was going to start a business. His business was going to be indoor growing of microgreens and the such for restaurants. Well, probably not the best business plan right now with so many restaurants in Manitoba closing down. So, he's looking for work. And so this is leading to that sort of those feelings of frustration, anxiety, and curiosity about where he'll land and how he's going to feel through that process. So as you start to pay attention to your feelings, I promise you, you get better at identifying them. You get really quick at identifying them. We're not really programmed to identify our feelings. Jim and I were having a chat earlier. We're close to the same age. I'm old, the oldest one, but we're close. And we grew up in an era where we were probably told, "Don't cry, everything's okay," and sort of we weren't really asked our feelings. And then we probably, with our children, we've probably spent a lot of time trying to get them to share their feelings. But I don't know that we still necessarily do a great job with feelings. So don't be too hard on yourself, but do continue to explore it, and explore it in an easy way. It's always really nice. Like, I find in the forest is a really easy way to get in touch with things like gratitude, things like accepting imperfection, because the forest to me is nothing but imperfection. It's always a chaotic mess, and yet I love it. I don't ask for it to be organized. So it has really opened my heart to that same imperfection in others and in myself. So that's something that you might want to consider trying. While you were trying to listen for your feelings, what you might have had come up are some negative core beliefs. And we all have these, and I'll happily share my biggest one. The one that always comes up, and she wears many outfits, but at the end of the day, if we could strip her naked, what she's really saying is, "I am not enough." And so whether that's, as a professional, "Oh, I'm not good enough. What am I doing here with Jim Millard? I'm not good enough to be doing this." That would be how that might show up. How might it show up in my relationship with my husband? Well, I'm not sure he loves me as much as I love him. Like, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not enough for him. So these are ideas of how my strongest negative core belief might show up for me. When you're starting to listen to your feelings, if you have a lot of strength in your negative core beliefs, these come from childhood. They are so well conditioned in us that they do show up. And if they're showing up really fiercely, please pay attention that isn't truth. That's a childhood thing that the information you processed as a child has stayed with you. You've internalized it. You're an adult now. You can recognize it for what it is. So just be careful with that. As far as values go, we gave you a lovely list of values. And I think most of us think we know our values until maybe something causes some competition in the values, or there's such a massive disruption in our lives like COVID and 2020 with Black Lives Matter and with the political unrest. All of that really brought forth, not that I changed my values, but it really had me reorganizing my values and reprioritizing them. And I remember when I had my Hodgkin's, really, my values were so clear at that time. It was a beautiful thing. It was my favorite thing about having an illness, a life-threatening illness, was that it made my values so crystal clear that I never doubted anything I ever said or did, because they were always right here and they came out for me very easily. With COVID, we may notice that there's competing values. So, the primary needs and values are obviously safety, belonging, and identity. And this past year may have thrown a wrench into all three of those, So if you are not feeling safe with COVID itself, or you don't feel like your family is safe because of COVID, if your work, in my case, I haven't been face-to-face with patients. Most of you probably are back. But this sense of identity, who am I? If I'm not a physio, 33 years of face-to-face contact with people, and all of a sudden I'm not doing that, well, then who am I? And wow, if I'm not earning my keep at home because I'm down to 25% of my regular income, who am I? And of course, the belonging, which is, some people will call that, everybody will call that belonging. It's the identity some people will call mattering, like Christine Comaford. So if you have competing values, it can get tricky to sort of get to your feelings as well. One of the things that we have found useful, I've recommended it to my kids and to friends and to clients, when you are struggling with making a decision based on competing values, we sort of think about making a list of pros and cons and trying to figure out which list looks better. Somewhere long ago, I read the notion that maybe it's better to make a list of the pros for each decision. So if we consider my situation, go back to in-person care or continue with telehealth only to protect my parents, make the list of pros for each of those, and then make my decision based on the list of pros. So it works very rapidly, you will find, because if you have been unclear about what your primary value was, when you make that list, it'll show up. It'll show up without your having to ask it specifically. So there are little strategies like that we can use when we think we're not in touch with how we're really feeling or what we're really valuing. And that's what the rituals are about. The rituals are about trying to get us to journey towards self-discovery, a deeper form of listening, a deeper form of presence. We gave you many, many different paths, and it is absolutely not all inclusive. There are other things you could do that could be considered a ritual that would help you to stay in touch with who you are. I always think of my rituals as my compass. I'm a people pleaser, and I'm a real feeler. And it's really easy for me to get lost in a story based on what someone else needs or what someone else wants from me. And next thing I know, I'm not being I'm not staying true to my values and to my positive beliefs. And I'm probably operating from some negative beliefs. So these rituals will help to keep you there. My favorite ritual, I didn't include it because I didn't know what to say about it, but silent solitude and stillness, which every single one of these has at least one component of that. But I like the three of them together. I call them the Holy Trinity, the other Holy Trinity, just really a nice way to ground. So if you can find time for silence, solitude, and stillness, whether it's in a forest, whether it's sitting by a lake, whether it's sitting in your living room, I highly recommend it, even 5 minutes in the morning or at night. In the morning before you greet anybody else, or at night right before you go to bed. It's a beautiful thing. So we did talk about, I'm going to ask you, Karim, are you watching the chat? Is there anything I need to answer before I get in there? Because I can't watch the chat and sorry and talk.
Jim, you know what? Jim is so active on the chat right now. He's like, I had to mute him because he's like typing like a fiend on there. And every time you were talking about your life altering condition, and all I saw is Jim and his silhouette madly typing away. So I had to turn. He's definitely doing it. This would be a good time if anyone's got a question since we just transitioned right now in the chat. If you guys want to put it in there. Otherwise, let's. I think everything looks good so far. I love the rituals you talked about, and everything. So let's carry on. I think everything looks good so far.
I think Jim wanted to show us something there.
Jim, hit your
Yeah,
hand.
can I hit it?
Yeah.
So Anna talked about values. Sorry about my loud typing there because I'm a pecker, right?
The Commodore 64 fortunately works with Zoom. They did it, and I'm so glad.
Is it good? Because poor Andrea and Kriston here kind of are trying to get me off the 64, but I don't know how. So every 3 times a year, I make a little values list and I keep it in my wallet. And it was something I learned through a coaching course. And when I actually get pissed off, I try to say, okay, this is just my values. And I go and look at my list and I'll always find right on there the reason why I'm pissed off. I breathe into it, but it's a great values exercise. A lot of these were on the list. That list we gave you isn't inclusive, really make your own, but a really great exercise, just a real ritual for me. But I'll let Anna. Yeah.
Jim, just we're talking about vulnerability here. Would you mind sharing a couple of your values?
My list?
Yeah.
So this is my recent list, maybe from about 2 months ago. Love, family, truth, health, empathy, compassion, service, nature, autonomy, spirituality, courage, and connection. Those are my current values. They change, right? They evolve. But most of it, that's Jim Millard right there, whoever that self is.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And you talked about writing things down, I think, right? Writing things. How powerful is that? for people before we transition to other things? How powerful is it to take pen to paper? Like, is that something that for our attendees should be doing on a regular basis as part of their triple S Trinity?
It is absolutely, I believe, the fastest way to self-awareness. I think that what happens when, and it's different to have a pen in your hand and paper in front of you versus typing into a computer. I strongly recommend you get yourself a journal that looks appealing and a pen that you love to hold, and keep it out somewhere where you're going to see it. Mine stays out in my, we call it our Starbucks corner in our kitchen. It's where I sit first thing in the morning. And it's always sitting there for me in the morning so that I see it, I open it, and the first thing I do in the morning is I journal. People either love or hate journaling. You're either totally into it or you absolutely hate it. I think one of the problems with journaling is that we think it has to be a certain way, but it really doesn't. It can be whatever you want it to be, and play with different strategies. You know, when people ask me how should I journal, I just hate to answer it, because to me that's like, what should I eat? Well, I don't know. What do you like to eat? When was the last time you ate? And are you an omnivore or are you a vegetarian? So I think that when you start to write, what works for you will appear. I promise you that. So in the notes that we sent out, we gave you several different ways to potentially journal, starting with a brain dump. I'm going to tell you, I have done them all and I still do them all. And the reason that I'm not committed to one way of journaling is because I'm a different person every single morning when I wake up. And what I feel like having to eat, drink, or how I want to write are going to vary from day to day, except for my coffee in the morning and my tea at night. You know, everything else in between is a free-for-all. And it's the same with the writing and the journaling. So some days I'm doodling and all I do is doodle. But those doodles are very fascinating. I will tell you that when I journaled during my illness, I did a lot of drawing because my kids were really little. They were 5 and 3. And so I would do a lot of drawing so that we could color the drawings together in my journal. It was a way of distracting them. It was a way of soothing me. But when you look back at that journal and the drawings were revealing what I was unwilling to say out loud to anybody. The colors from the days when I was really struggling, the months when I was really struggling, the only colors ever used were gray, black, and brown. And as I started to emerge from that, suddenly greens and blues start to show up. And then at the end, when I'm starting to feel better, everything is in yellows and oranges. I did not consciously choose those colors. I did not consciously choose what I was drawing, but what's happening inside of you wants to get out. And if it doesn't come out in a way that is healthy, it's going to come out in a way that is unhealthy. So, you know, play with the journaling. Sometimes my journals are a prayer. Sometimes they are only inspirational quotes that I find. When I have nothing to say, I can't even do a brain dump because I'm too fried. I look for inspirational quotes and I put them into my journal. And just doing that already starts to tell me what I need and starts to help me to move out of whatever it is. So please don't throw journaling out as an option if you've tried it once and hated it, because honestly, there's so many different ways to do it.
So Anna, I'm beginning to think of whether Jim is actually married to you, because in the chat, Jim is answering when you actually journal, when he journals. But I actually wanted to ask you, since you're talking about journaling, because everyone has a different circadian rhythm. Everyone, you know, some people are night owls. Some people are, you know, are like myself, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and thrive. Is there a value in terms of setting intentions, reflecting? What would you advise to people who are looking for soul syncing, of being able to sync their soul with all the messages that are coming from the universe, so they can actually truly, like, you know, become one with that?
For sure. And there's really great structured ideas out there. And I have done structured journaling, and I will still occasionally do structured journaling where I'm asking myself a question. And I will ask that question probably for an entire week. And I'll try to ask it to myself in different ways so that I'm getting an authentic response and not getting a fear-based response, not getting a negative core belief. So for sure, there is value in that method of very guided. Did you want to say something, Jim?
Oh, I'm just going to say, um, yeah, it's one of the questions was, Anna, you didn't see it. Maybe like Kareem's, do you do it in the morning or the evening? I jumped in and
I
said,
do.
yeah, go for it.
I do it in the morning because I find if I do it at the end of the day, first of all, I'm too tired because I'm like you. I'm up somewhere between 4:30 and 5:15 a.m. I'm up early, and I like to do it in the morning because I find it sets it takes I take care of myself first then before I have to take care of anybody else or listen to anybody else. I already know where my heart sits for that day. And so I feel like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for everyone else. But for some people, the preference is to do it at night. I've tried that. It just didn't work for me. But I would encourage you to, if you tried in the morning and it didn't work, try at night. I know Jim likes to journal at night.
Yeah, I kind of do some blessings in the morning, some poetry in the morning, and I kind of look at a reflection at the end of the day, just on, what did I learn that day? So that's mine. That doesn't take me long. But I kind of like it to bookend the day a little bit. And I love the fact you're up so early. And I know Kareem's up at 5, I'm up at 5, you're up at 5 different time zones, but it's that ritual. And I think the journaling is just part of that. It's amazing.
I like
For
that,
sure. For
so
sure.
in the chat, guys, everyone in the chat, can you put in your journaling or not so we can just see who's in the chat? Say yes for journaling, no for not journaling as we speak, just so we can get a guide of if everyone's journaling, then we can pivot. So tell us, we got a good, not definitely a mixture, a lot of no's in there. So thinking about it, thinking about starting. You know what's interesting is, and Anna and Jim, you might be able to reflect on this, but Bruce Lee is probably the king of conquering fears. And I never forget the story where Bruce Lee would write down at the beginning of the day his biggest fear of the day, and he would literally write it on a piece of paper and actually physically burn it. And that's how he would actually conquer his fear. He would like physically burn. I don't know how he didn't burn his hand, but the king of conquering fears was, so definitely there's some power to putting pen to paper. I got a question for you. Being married and writing stuff in my journal, I often wonder, and I've been journaling a lot on my phone on Evernote, but I'm there's this vulnerability that sometimes I'm just like, oh man, what if my wife finds this thing and starts reading this just by curiosity? What if I just leave it out there? Because you guys are talking like, this is a la-di-da world, no problems, and this and that. Like, do you guys ever feel like writing all this stuff down exposes you to the world? Because I know Andrea talked about like the saboteur, you know what I mean? Imposter syndrome. Like, tell us about that.
So for sure. So my journal is left out. Anybody can open it and read it. And I have a saying: if you didn't want me to write anything nasty about you, should have been nicer. If the truth is gonna hurt for you to read it, you should have been nicer. And if I'm really concerned that maybe this is something that I really don't want somebody to read, I have 2 strategies. One is I'll journal it, and I will either tear it out and mail it to someone I trust. A friend that I really trust will receive it, because I don't have the heart to spill my heart and guts out and then to burn it. To me, it's like, I wrote that means I needed to see it, and that means I need another witness. But I might need a witness that is not one I'm married to or not one of my children. So then I will take it out and I will send it away. Another strategy I've used is I have written poems. And so you get a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for, Jim, when you write poetry and you're kind of, you're not really saying cryptic. You're cryptic. You're a little bit cryptic. But yes, absolutely. So you could hide your journal if you didn't want other people reading it, if it was going to trouble you. I don't know what you do, Jim.
Yeah, I have 2 journals. My secret one. Just kidding. Yeah, that's tough, right? Because half the time you do leave it out, right? It's there's you've got kids and stuff at home. And, you know, if I was a kid, I would read my parents' journal. But yeah, it's tough. And it's funny you talk about poetry, and I love poetry, and I've always kind of been a little bit of a poet, but I went to it when my wife got ill and shortly after, and then I just went away from it for a few years and then got back to it with COVID. And that's kind of been my little, I wouldn't say it's cryptic, but metaphorically just trying to find that space between speech and stillness, right? That path that lets me go from my head to my heart, and it just allows me to kind of bring, I don't know, just bring myself out into the world. So I find that I do a lot more poetic journaling in that cryptic sense when I'm trying to be secretive, maybe.
Karim, I love that. For those who actually want to get started and want some structure, I'm sure Anna and Jim have heard of the 5-minute journal. Fantastic setup of gratitude, gratitude, intentions. And, if you want to go high level, like Erdem, he can talk to you about Brendan Bouchard's, strategic planning manual that will take you like an hour to fill out. But I don't want to talk too much, guys. So Anna, take us through the rest of this.
So the only thing I'm going to say, the last thing I didn't want to forget to say is you should, if we watched the Tasha Eurich video, we will have learned that sometimes journaling is not effective because we're asking the wrong question. So if we continually ask ourselves, why did this happen to me? Why am I in this situation again? Then the journaling is not going to be very positive experience, and it's not going to help guide us. So the question is always what can I learn from this? What did I do that maybe in the past that maybe makes this more obvious? What is always better than why? So just watch yourself on that one. All right. Then we listed a mindfulness, and mindfulness is an easy one in the sense that it requires no time. It just changes how you go about your day. And it's just, being more attentive, a moment by moment awareness without judgment. And it's a beautiful thing to do. A really easy way to start practicing that is with the senses. So it's sort of almost getting to the end of tangerine and citrus season. So in our home, we love all the different oranges. Oranges have such exquisite flavor and such a strong smell. So you can see the orangeness, you can taste the orangeness, you can smell the orangeness, and just be mindful of that while you're eating it, and just watch the difference in the level of experience. And the same will be true for whatever you encounter. A thought pops into your head, have a mindfulness about it. Oh, that sounds like that's a negative core belief popping up, or, oh, wait a minute, that's a feeling popping up. Just learning to pay attention. Negative self-chatter. Oh, that's just my inner critic. I don't need to, I used to name my inner critic, but my inner critic doesn't really show up so much anymore because I've been more mindful. So mindfulness is an easy one and costs you nothing in the way of time. Meditation gets a funny rap because Jim and I had this conversation. He says to me, I don't like to sit on a pillow. And I'm like, I know, I don't necessarily like to sit on a pillow and either. But actually now I don't mind it. I didn't like it initially. Now I don't mind it, but there's so many different forms of meditation, and we listed off all of those. Interestingly, the question has come up from patients, is running and biking considered meditative? And I would have answered no, because for me, they're not. But I should change that response now, and I should say it might be for you, and we won't know until you try it that way. So what does happen for me after running or biking is I often have a lot of clarity about what I need, but while I'm biking and running, it's absolutely not meditative for me. So other people may be different. So we listed many different forms there. Mindful movement, again, Tai Chi, yoga, dancing are the ones that really come up. Martial arts, some of the martial arts. But again, could strength training be considered mindful movement? Absolutely. I don't know if Scotty's on the call tonight, but I know he's going to be doing some research in the way of strength training and mindfulness to see if it can be effective. And I think probably will be just fine. We can certainly make running and cycling, mindful movement as well, but which is meditation. So walking in nature is one of my all-time favorite things. I try to get to the forest almost every day, and I'm really fortunate that I have a lot of forest really nearby. So it's easy for me to access it, but it is the easiest there, as I mentioned, to learn to love and embrace imperfection. And we know the science on nature in terms of settling our nervous system, the forest bathing, etc. Beautiful, beautiful opportunities arise from being in the forest. Talking out loud, a funny one, right? And we think, oh, how could that be a way to self-awareness? So probably my first experience with talking out loud that I realized was a really great, insightful tool was when I first became a mom. You become a mom, and this expectation is that your children are perfect, or, sorry, that's the Italian body movements.
I'll tell you live. Recorded, guys, just so you know.
Exactly. So I remember thinking my kids were, or even it was when I even had just the one, you get to that point where you're just so frustrated, and what you want to say is WTF, but you actually want to say the real words, which in Italian, I'm like, che cazzo. And thankfully I learned that one from my mama because she used it a lot. And I realized, oh, okay, so I need to voice some frustration, but clearly I'm not going to voice it to my children. And so this talking out loud can lead us to, what's really happening for us. And when we can hear ourselves, we can then maybe be kinder in how we're going to deliver the message. Like, oh, I'm really frustrated with this scene, or I'm really frustrated with what's happening here, because you've expressed the frustrated piece out loud to yourself. Make sure you're asking good questions when you are talking out loud once you get the ma che cazzo out. So instead, again, not ruminating type questions. That is the difference between talking out loud and that inner critic that tends to really take over in silence. Getting creative, so painting, drawing, coloring. Adult coloring books are amazing. Doodling, singing, writing poetry, writing songs, dancing, anything that inspires you. Probably one of the most fun ways to get to know yourself. I hosted girlfriends for I think I told you guys, for a little retreat, and we did a Picasso painting, and the colors that came out and where they came out, so for example, I painted my neck area in rainbow. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And then you start to think about that. Well, I think that has to do with having a voice. I was silenced in a previous time in my life, and I'm no longer silenced. And so again, these things that you don't even realize you realize they're there. Maybe you don't, but they will reveal themselves. They will become visible. And listening to music or playing a musical instrument is another really beautiful way of getting in touch with what's going on. Your choice of music is not as coincidental as you think it is. And so if you start to pay attention to what you're choosing to listen to, you may gain some insight into what's going on for you. Greater level of self-awareness. Same with playing a musical instrument. What are you playing? Remember that the rituals are just a way to create space for yourself, for your real self to emerge. And so you don't have to do all of them by any stretch of the imagination. You're going to pick what works for you, and hopefully you'll stick with it. And then once you've created space, then you got to learn to hold space. Do we all know what holding space means? So holding space for what you find. Holding space is basically a term that came about a few years ago. It's been around forever, but the term itself has only been around for a couple of years. And it refers to compassionate and non-judgmental listening. So sort of being a witness. And if you think about what we do at work, we are holding space all day long because we have people who either have injury, illness, potentially life-altering situations, and they're telling us what's happened to them. They're telling us how they're feeling. And hopefully we're holding space well, without judgment, without our own story behind it, without hijacking their space, which I'll discuss in a second. But we also need to learn to hold space for ourselves. This, of course, all gets very tricky when we're all in a pandemic together and everybody's in a cocoon, terrified, and we don't know what, when the whole thing is going to be over. It gets a little bit tougher because everybody wants to be at the center of the space. So if you can hold space for yourself, you will find that it is easier to go to work and hold space for your clients. I can't promise you it's going to be any easier to hold space for your loved ones. They're the toughest, because if we're in a situation together, like a pandemic, where everyone is having their individual reactions, the people we're the closest to are going to be the hardest ones for us to hold space for. So sometimes it might serve us well to have someone else hold space for us, to have someone else hold space for our loved ones if the situation becomes a little bit more difficult. I won't go too much more into holding space because that is going to be explored in our third mail out, but I'm happy to answer questions about it. I don't even know what time it is. So, okay, yeah, we're good.
Time. So this is a good time, guys, to jump in on the chat. I know Jim's been working ferociously on this chat, jotting down. Look at the chat. Those are your Cole's notes right now. Screenshot it, do whatever you need. This is a great time. If you guys want to raise your hand, if you wanted to jump in and get on the mic and ask a question, this would be a great time to just hit the raise your hand, and we can always look at asking and recapping. While people are contemplating this, Anna, Jim, there's a lot of talk about putting pen to paper, walking through nature, movement. Is it the intention that we're trying to ground ourselves, to take our brain and somehow use our extremities to somehow connect connect ourselves? Is this something that's critical?
I think so. It's all neuroscience at the end of the day. And I like to just try to simplify everything into a box of 4 if possible, right? And it's all the same stuff. Like whether I'm mobilizing something, manipulating something, exercising something, or whatever, it's all doing the same thing, right? Descending inhibition, probably. I'm simplifying. But it's the same thing for mindfulness, for meditation, for journaling. It's just taking this, quieting down so you can hear this. It gets you to the same place. It's getting you to focus on the object, not the subject, and not make the subject the object. It's all the same stuff. There's so many different ways. Anna had a serious illness and it got her into these habits. I watched somebody else have a serious illness and it got me into the habits. We have 2 totally different sets of rituals, but I think we arrive the same place, what Karim's talking about. And that's just, I think it's resilience, and that's where we're going with this. And there's been that great article by Tabibnia in 2020 that just says, upgrade the positive, down regulate the negative. But the real secret neurobiologically was this transcendence of the self, right? And we'll go into that more in a couple of weeks. But yeah, I agree. I think it's just, all of that.
So what would you guys, this is a question for both Anna and Jim, is we're talking about exploring ourselves inside, exposing our inner saboteur. This is some tough stuff to do. And when you start facing these things, can you give some advice to people when they maybe don't feel great about this? They don't feel great about this discovery, or of what they feel like on the inside, or maybe they have this shadow every time they look in. That's maybe why they don't want to look inside. What can you offer, or what kind of suggestions? Because you guys have done this for so long and faced so many crises, more than I can ever imagine. And so grateful that you're sharing this. What can you tell us about how to face these tough inner conversations?
So I'm always going to say, have a good cry, and there's really great science about crying. And crying is a really great way to hold space for yourself. When you can hold space for yourself, when you can be compassionate with yourself, when you can say, okay, that was a really shitty thing I did. And I'm not really proud of the fact that I did that. Why did I do that? How can I make sure I don't do that again? But can you just hold it all very compassionately? You can learn to do that. And that's where I do believe that we learn to be compassionate with other people, but honestly, we're going to be much more compassionate with other people if we can learn to give it to ourselves first. It's just giving yourself a break. Someone did ask, are there rituals you can do to help you hold space? All of these rituals help you to hold space. The irony there is it's kind of a funny thing. I didn't know whether to put holding space at the beginning or at the end, because holding space is a ritual. All of this that you do is holding space in one way or another. So at the end of the day, it becomes this kind of a loop. You know, you hold space for yourself, and then you can better hold space for others. How can you, if you're really struggling with your shadows, I would say, you know, I've been to counselors. I've been to counselors more than once. And I've not necessarily been to the same counselors for different episodes, you know, and it has never been a disappointment, ever. Well, actually, there was one I walked out on, but he was a marriage counselor and he was doing a really bad job. And I walked out on him. And my then partner did not, because he thought he was doing a great job. But for the most part, you know, if you really are struggling, absolutely go and talk to a professional, because they are so amazing at having heard everything that there is nothing you can tell them that's going to shock them. And they're just going to nod their heads and say, oh yeah, and tell me more, you know, and somehow that acceptance, they know how to hold space. They've been trained how to hold space. So, which brings me to hijacking space. So we can hijack space from ourselves, and we can hijack space from others. We can hijack space from others often if we're really uncomfortable. And that's probably why we hijack from ourselves as well. But let's imagine that a client says to you, you know, they've got a really terrible knee injury. They've got an ACL that's shot, and they're saying, I'm planning to do the marathon in 6 months. And the first thing that comes out of your mouth is something like, well, I don't think so. You know, you're not even walking well yet. You've just hijacked their space because they've told you their greatest dream at this moment, and you didn't let it land. You immediately threw the hot potato right back at them. So with ourselves, we can often do that if we become aware of a feeling, and we might say something like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Other people have it a lot harder than you do. Or when are you going to learn to get over yourself? Like, you've been through this before. You should know how to deal with this. So those negative judgments. So either hijacking it by throwing in a negative judgment, or hijacking it by redirecting it, hijacking it by trying to one up someone. Oh, well, you had Hodgkin's, I had breast cancer. You know, that would be hijacking space as an example. But I will go more into that in the notes. But yeah, it's a tough one. It can be painful, but I promise you, it's so worthwhile, and it isn't painful forever.
That's deep. That's like, I often think of what you said about people always wanting up your circumstances, and that was beautifully said about hijacking. I always think of those as energy vampires, but I love the hijack ritual. Jim, any thoughts on what Anna had said about the discovery past that saboteur, and the guilt, the shame that people need to sort of, I don't know, maybe accept, or thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a trained counselor here, guys, but I think it's just the stories we tell ourselves, right? And it's hard to get away from that conditioned stuff of who I'm supposed to be and versus who am I anyway. We can go into a big conversation on what is a self. I probably have 82 selves, right? And they're always talking to me, but it's the ability to step back and be able to kind of watch them and decide how they're going to serve me. And it's self-compassion. And I think what Anna's talking about, in order to kind of block all that other stuff out, you really have to have that self-compassion. And Brene talked about it as that loving self-worth. That's the foundation everything builds on. We are love. And it's not, you don't have to add stuff to be love. You actually have to take stuff away. it's taking off those layers. And when you take all those saboteurs away, all those layers, all those veils, and you get down to your naked friggin' truth, it's love. And it's at the top of the ladder. And you get there by subtracting who you're supposed to be to just become who you are. And that sounds deep, but you read any kind of poetry, you listen to any religion, I'm not going to get off on a tangent, it's all the same. And that's what it's basically kind of coming down to, not to offend anyone, but it's love. And it's self-love first.
That's beautifully said. You know, I think as physical therapists that are on this call right now, I think we've been indoctrinated in school that there's this set path that when you graduate, you do your levels, you get your FCamp, then you become a clinic owner, and then you get little new grads as little worker bees and all this stuff. And then if you're not at that, that level, you've accomplished that, what's next, right? So that was beautifully said. Anna, any thoughts on discovering yourself or rekindling that self-love?
I think, again, I say take yourself outdoors to the forest. The forest is my favorite. Of course, an ocean could work too, but I think the forest is perpetually decomposing, perpetually, like it's in a state of chaos. It never looks perfect ever. And it's stunning no matter the season. I photograph it in every season. I don't have a favorite season. It's mucky. I love it. So you learn to just embrace chaos and imperfection in other things where it's super easy. I promise you'll learn to embrace them in yourself as well. I think that, it starts to happen when you just start to let go of expectations, let go of, recognizing that we all want to feel connected. We all want to feel seen and heard. And our biggest fear is that something about us isn't worthy. If we just recognize we all have that same thing going through us, it just makes it so much easier. We're all in the same boat.
Beautifully
that
said.
way.
Beautifully said. So what would you describe between this may be going off topic, but what would you tell someone, one of these guys that are attending this Self-Care Sunday here are high achievers, and in this path to self-discovery, what kind of advice would you give to our attendees? Because we're all physios that may have discovered that this mountain that they've climbed through their career is the wrong summit. And the summit that they wanted to be from the self-discovery is actually over there. How would you guide these people on that?
I would tell them to read a book called The Second Mountain by David Brooks. So not to get too off on a tangent, but especially as you get to 50 and you start to have what we call a nervous breakdown, which is really a spiritual awakening. There's two mountains. I'm going to answer that by there's two mountains. The first part of our life, we climb the mountain that we were told to climb, and we get to the top and say, holy fuck, this is bullshit. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. And then you start to realize that you don't have to climb the second mountain. You're already going up it. And so David Brooks wrote a great book on it last year called The Second Mountain, and it's just phenomenal. And the other great book that is like my Bible is called Lovability by Robert Holden. I just finished it now, and talks about the same thing, right? So I think there's two mountains, and you got to climb the first one before you can even see the second one.
Awesome.
I would add to that we know from the research that your best skill is being able to be your authentic self with compassion. And it doesn't matter whether you're a physio or whether you're a business manager. We know that. The research has been clear on that. So we spend all this time and energy working on our levels. And at the end of the day, it's our authenticity and our ability to have and demonstrate compassion. And if we can't have compassion for ourselves first, we're not going to have it to the same level for others. So there is the value in learning this now, before you're 50, before you're going for your second mountain. It was the biggest blessing. I was sick when I was 32 years old. I would tell you without a lie that I would not change 1 minute of the shit that I went through, because I think it propelled me to a different level of understanding of myself and of others. And it was, for me, worth it. And I would never say that to anybody else who's undergoing any kind of, life-threatening illness. But for me, it was the best thing that happened to me in many ways at that time.
That was beautiful. Sounds like this mountain climbing is really hit
Yeah.
hit a
No, and I want to give a shout out here to Caitlin, because Caitlin and I go back and forth on the gram. I'm new to the gram, and she's on a bit of a coaching discovery too, and she's nailed it. It sounds like the first mountain is all about self-discovery, and maybe we just don't see it that way, but there's no spiritual bypass. You got to go up the first mountain, and then you don't even climb the second one. It pulls you up it. And it's amazing. And that's called purpose and meaning, but you can't see it. Like, it's just going to get you at a certain point, and your destiny will just become it. And again, it sounds philosophical, but we serve people for a living. We bleed for people. We give our heart and soul. We cry with people. It is not an easy job. And you get to a certain point where you got nothing left. And if you're not putting something in that cup, you're not a 55-year-old, 56-year-old physiotherapist anymore. You just can't do it. You're not a parent. You're not a daughter taking care of elderly patients. So rituals are resilience. And I can't say enough about just creating those habits to allow you to kind of become fulfilled. The journey is fulfillment.
So Jim and Anna, just to expand on what you said, Jim, is holding space the same thing as reconnecting with your purpose and meaning? So I just wanted to, is that, or is it something different?
Two different things.
Tell us about that.
Two different things. So holding space, it's almost easier. So holding space becomes we can make it such a difficult, complex, concept, but it basically is not so complicated. It's just being accepting of whatever someone says to you without trying to make your own intentions known, make your own thoughts about it take precedence, without judging it, with compassion. So let's give you an example of good holding space and bad holding space. And I'll go back to my illness, because that's when those concepts didn't exist in my vocabulary. And holding space as a concept probably didn't even exist in the literature back then. Walked into a mall because I needed time on my own. I didn't live near the forest. I did live near the forest, but I didn't like the forest. I was afraid of the forest at that time. So off to the mall I went to deal with, my chemo was going to start the following 2 days. And I was really anxious. I left my former husband with the kids, and I went to the mall, and I walked into a store, and I was wearing my Sport Physiotherapy Canada outfit. And a beautiful young woman came up to me, and she owned the place. I found out afterwards. She didn't try to sell me anything. She saw my outfit. She goes, "Oh, you're a physio." And I said, "I am." And she said, "Oh, tell me about that. So tell me what you do." And I told her a little bit, and then somehow I just started telling her that in 2 days, I'm going to go start chemo. And she never dropped the ball, Karim. She didn't try to change the subject. Like, "Oh, you came in here, you must be looking for something." She's like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" I didn't know this woman, and I told her everything. I told her stuff I hadn't told anybody else before, simply because she never backed away, and she just she let everything that I said land without ever making a judgment about it. I repeatedly went back to that store during treatment just to be physically close to her, because to me, she was like some kind of just crazy angelic person who's like, wow, everyone else, my friends, when, they would hear that I had Hodgkin's, they'd say, "I can't believe that's true. It can't be true. There's no way. You're the healthiest person I know." That's hijacking space. As an example, we can hijack space when we have good intentions even, right? So holding space is just letting things land when you hear them. without judgment, without needing to change it, without needing to one up it. As difficult and as simple as that.
That's beautiful. We've got just hitting the 7 o'clock, or sorry, my time, 7 o'clock hour. Is beautifully said. I just wanted to, maybe you can give everyone, so Jim and Anna, what's the one thing that our community here could do over the next week, you know, just to implement what we just talked about, so that they could just spring forward, even just this a very small nugget. What's one thing they could do for this
I'm
week?
gonna let the coach answer that one.
I'm gonna say get up 15 minutes earlier, write and go to yourself, and that will be huge on its own.
Beautiful. Jim, Anna, what's the one thing that our attendees, our community of self-mastery experts to become mastering their self space, what's the one thing that they can do for this week to elevate themselves?
I'm going to ask them to pay attention to when they're holding space for others and see how, if you can see that it feels so good for that other person to just be able to tell you whatever they need to tell you, and you just let it land. And then I want you to just practice letting whatever comes up for you land.
Awesome.
But see, witness it in holding it for others, not your family, but your clients.
Beautiful. That's amazing. So we're obviously going to be sending in some more of these unbelievable handouts. We're looking at this Friday. So guys, everyone look out for your email. This Friday, we're going to be sending out that homework. So if you've had only a small chance to do our most recent mail out, expect that the next mail out will be this Friday coming up. And then we're going to be following up live in 2 weeks. I wanted to thank Jim and Anna for their incredible contributions. I wanted to thank everyone on this call for believing in yourself, giving yourself the self-love through self-discovery. Anna, if people wanted to connect with you from now to our next live session, how will they find you?
You can find me. You can email me at annademarcophysio@gmail.com, or you can send me a DM on Instagram, Anna DeMarco Physio, and then we can connect by email or by phone, whatever's going to work for you.
Awesome. And Jim, the grand man who always comments on the gram whenever I post something. But Jim, so where would we find you if you've got questions?
Just because I need the practice on the gram. So find me on the gram at Jim Millard _. There you go. I didn't get the ad in front of that, but
so Jim, just for the tech people, it's Jim _Millard, not Jim Millard _. So the OG has spoken, guys. Thank you so much for everyone for attending. Out of a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being inspired to 0 being give me more. Guys, in the chat, put in the chat, how inspired are you to take on the world of self-mastery? Put it in the chat right now as we say goodbye. We got hundreds, we got 11s and 10s and 2000s. Thank you, guys. We're looking forward to you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Anna. Thanks to everyone for attending. And look forward to connecting in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Have fun.
Well, this is good job, guys. This is I love. We're still live right now, but as people are signing off. But I just wanted to say that was fantastic, Anna. Like, man, that was deep. The stuff that you were saying, and Jim, man, I love the second climb. That was something that was just, yeah, that second mountain thing was really resonated with people. So fantastic. I'm looking forward to the next couple weeks as we go from there. There's 10
Thank
people
you so much, Karim,
that are hanging on for one more gem.
You hear me swear in live.
you can do it in Italian. I taught you how to do it in Italian.
Ma che cazzo, cazzo, che cazzo, che cazzo.
There you go.
Sono adesso cazzo.
Anna, give us one more thing. There's 9 people that are hanging on.
Okay, so Mindfulness is the other one that costs us nothing. Just, just pay attention to, you're going to enjoy that orange, or you're going to open that door. What does it feel like? Where are your feet planted when you're opening that door? You just learn to start to pay attention to the easy things, and then magically the other things show up really easily as well.
That's awesome. Jim, last
Yeah.
pull before I hit the end on the session.
Just, yeah, step back and be the ocean looking at the waves. As weird as it is, believe me, I'm a scientist, and to talk about this stuff, I feel like I'm singing Kumbaya at a campfire in the 70s, but it's truth, and I live by it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys again. Looking forward to connecting with you guys in 2 weeks, same time, same channel. Thank you so much for contributing to our profession and giving back to us at a 10x level. Anyone that goes through these sessions, goes through the work, discovers themselves, holds their space, and stays clear of those hijackers are just going to be like epic performers. So thank you very much for being part of this. I'm going to actually hit the end on this one now.
Okay.